Welcome to Katrina's Creations Knitting Podcast. This is a special little midweek podcast because my video on Saturday, I was afraid of it being too long, so I split it up a little bit. And because I got some new supplies in for storing some of my knitting materials, I thought I would show you what I store in my notions pouch and how I store my knitting needles. So let's get started. I have this little travel bag that I got from IKEA years ago. They no longer make this, sadly, because I loved this bag. It was only $2.99 US dollars, but I really liked this. I have my little creepy rabbit. This is a polymer clay that I made that didn't turn out so well, but he's hanging out on the notions bag. So, in the first pouch down here, and the reason I liked these bags is the zippers on them are really, really great. But in the pouch here is what I get into all the time, so I try to keep it the closest, and that is a pair of scissors, a measuring tape, and a crochet hook, which I use for either picking up stitches or if I drop a stitch, for being able to loop it back through and pick it back up again. So those are things I use all the time, so I keep those in this outer pocket so I can get to them easily. Now the center pocket here, I keep my notions supplies. Now I used to store them a little bit differently, but I ordered these off of eBay, these little vinyl pouches, and I will put the link. They came in like 3 different sizes you could order. I will put the link down below in the description box of where you can get them. They were like 2 for 99 cents each. So, I mean, you get 2 for 99 cents. So what I have in here, I went to the dollar store and I purchased some of these little notebook rings. And I just looped them through. I just have the 2. And in this first one, I have beads because I do have a project. If I'm working on some beads, I keep those there. Next, I have large stitch markers, which I don't use all that often. I mainly use these large markers for making Dorset buttons. And I do have a tutorial up for how to make Dorset buttons, and I will put that over here. There'll be a little letter I. If you click on that, it'll show you the tutorial that I did on how to make Dorset buttons. Then I have 2 row counters. And I like this because I can see through it. I can grab what I need easily. These are just point protectors. I've got a variety of different types in here. I don't use them all that often. I actually like these. Yeah, you can see them. They're just a rubbery plastic, and they come in 2 different sizes. This is a smaller one, and I don't even use these so much for point protectors as I do to slide my needles through them to keep the stitches from falling off. So I don't use them so much for point protectors as I do just to kind of stitch holders to keep them from coming off of my needles. And then I just have the real cheap ones that just were kind of given away when I bought different things. They're just the little rubber, like spongy type of stops that have a little hole in the middle. So, oh, and this is the smallest of those rubber ones. And I think I got these for a couple cents a piece at my local yarn store. I don't know who makes them, but I like them. So, especially if you're doing something where your needles are really packed tight with stitches, it makes it nice because you can slip both needles through those holes and they're not going anywhere. Then I have all of my different progress keepers, because now that I've gotten into playing around with the polymer clay, I've got more progress keepers than I ever used to have. So, yeah, I got my progress keepers in here. And then I have regular stitch markers, and I'll show you some of those. Some of my favorite stitch markers are the cheapest. Just these plain, that I just dropped, just these plain plastic rings. They're some of my favorite because they don't snag on anything. They don't get in the way. I have a set of stitch markers that I made, which I will show you. I don't have all of them out here, but they're cute and I like them. Like, here's a little skein of yarn, and This says, I love knitting. You can't see it in the reflection because it's so shiny, but this one says Knitting Queen. And there's a couple other. I have a set of 6 in here somewhere. This one looks like a sweater being knitted. Let's see if I can get hold of it. Sweater being knitted on 2 knitting needles. And here we have a skein with 2 knitting needles coming through. They're cute, and I like them because they kind of jingle when you work with them. But anything that tends to dangle like that, while they look cute and everything, they do tend to get caught in the work that you're knitting, and you have to keep flipping them over, back and forth, because if you're doing yarn overs or whatever, they get in the way. So that's kind of why I like the round plain ones the best, because they're just there. You don't have to do anything to them. So then I have my needle gauge, and it's a US gauge. This is Tri-Goo. It's a needle gauge on one, a US size on one side, and a millimeter size on the other. And then I have my cable hooks. I have another smaller cable hook, but I'm using it right now for the sweater that I'm knitting, the one that has the cables that go all the way around it. And then I have these, which everyone will recognize what they are. They're just a cheap fix. Here they go. If you are doing a project where you've got a lot of long strands of yarn that just tend to get tangled up in other strands of yarn, like if you're doing stranded knitting, or if you have an end that you haven't woven and it's the beginning of your project, you can wrap it around this little bread, slip it right through this little spot here and wrap it through this. It kind of acts like a spool to hold all of that excess yarn, so it gets it up out of the way so you don't accidentally knit with it. So I have a couple of those, and I don't have too many of them. They're just ones that came off my bread wrappers as I've used them. So that is what is in my Notions pouch. And then in the bottom of this pouch are items that I don't use all that often, but I like to be able to have them handy. And what that is I have a beading needle. This is a beading crochet hook. This is 0.7 millimeters. And I use that if I am doing some beaded knitting. I have a little thing of wool wash. I have my darning needles, and this is a case for Tic Tac candies, but it works great for a needle case. So I've got all my needles in there. And then I just have an extra ruler. I really don't need it. It just sits in there. Since I've got the tape measure, I really don't need that. And then I have 2 stitch holders, because if you're doing sweaters, these wouldn't fit in my Notions pouch. And if you're doing sweaters, sometimes you have to hold the stitches off when you're doing the neck or the sleeves, like the shoulders and stuff, so or the arms. So I have 2 of my stitch holders. So that's what I keep in my Notions pouch. Now I'll show you how I am storing my knitting needles. Now my Notions pouch that I was just showing you, before I got those little vinyl sleeves, I used to have, it was a pot holder. It was designed very similar to what I'm going to show you right now. It was a pot holder here, but it was of course much smaller. And then in the center, they were the snack size Ziploc bags, and they're just hooked together in the center with bias tape. And I made this myself. These are just plain old Ziploc bags that I got at the dollar store. I think I've got 20, I think I have 10 bags on each side. And like I said, I just took some bias tape, and you tape the bags down first and then you sew them. So this is what I used to use for my needles. Like I said, I had a Notions bag that's very similar, that's just smaller, but it started wearing out. The plastic, this has lasted for several years, but the plastic does start wearing out. And some of my needles that are metal were starting to poke through, especially the smaller needles that are pointier, were starting to poke through some of these bags. So I didn't want to throw this bag out because I do like it, and it just ties shut. So what I did instead is I put my wooden needles in it and my double pointed needles, which are also, all of my double pointed needles are wood. So I put them in the bags, and the bags are labeled, you can see right here, by size. So I think I go from size 1. I have the US size as well as the millimeters. So I have US 0s or below all the way up to US 13, which is a 9 millimeter. And there you can see some of my double pointed needles that I have in there as well. So I didn't want to throw this bag out, so like I said, I'm storing all of my wooden needles in here, which I don't use all that much. I am primarily, my favorite is a metal needle. So here are the bags that I got to store my metal needles in. These are the same as those small bags that I showed you from my notions pouch, but these would fit, if you are into planners, this would be the A5 size, which is a 5 by 8 inch. The other ones that I showed you in my notions pouch are the A7 size, which is even smaller than a personal planner. Here's the size they are. They're probably like a 3 by 5. I think they're about 3 by 5 inches. So, anyway, these are the 5 by 8. And again, I went to the dollar store, and I think I got a pack of 5 of these for $1. And I do want to put some kind of cover on this. I just haven't done that yet. And I have, if you can see here, I have the US size as well as the millimeter. And I did that. It starts, let's see, I have a couple that are blank. So it starts at a 0.3 US. It's a 1.5 millimeter needle. So these are the ones that were poking through my bags, because as you can see, they are very, very tiny and very sharp. So they were poking through, which is what prompted me to buy these vinyl pouches, because I just figured they would maybe hold up a little bit longer. So they go, like I said, all the way up to the larger sizes. My real big chunky knitting needles are in wood. I don't have chunky metal ones. So my bigger sizes are in my wood needles. These go up to a 10.5, so 10.5 US, 6.5 millimeter is the largest that I have in the metal needles. So that is how I am storing my knitting needles now. I think all total, because I bought 14 of these, they came 2 for $1 again. So I spent about $7, and that included the shipping, and I got 14 pouches. So that's what I'm using, and then I spent $1 on the rings. So it's a cheap alternative to storing your knitting needles, and I will put the links to that eBay seller where I bought them from, because they arrived quickly, and I ordered twice from him, once for the small ones, once for the large ones. So I'm very happy with them, and like I said, I will put the link down below how to get hold of those. So hope you've enjoyed this, and I will see you again on Saturday. Thanks again for watching.